So today we're discussing Hayato Mahak Sakurai versus Frank Trigg. This was in December of 2000 in Shudo. And in Shudo, the welterweight division was 168 pounds. Trigg is our second Raw fighter. Previously, we talked about Randy Couture when he fought Enson Inoue. For those of you who don't remember, Raw stands for Real American Wrestling. It was the wrestling-based MMA team, one of the very first, coached by Rico Ciparelli. Frank Trigg was one of the coaches also. And it had Randy Couture, Dan Henderson, who later broke off to form Team Quest with Matt Lindland. Now, Shuto actually predates UFC as far as MMA organizations. So MMA was around, professional MMA was around before UFC. And Shudo was actually started by the original Tiger Mask, Satoru Sayama, and it was started in 1985. The reason why it's called Shudo is because it's the Japanese pronunciation of shoot. So it was started by pro wrestling promoters. It featured pro wrestlers from Japan. Why they called it shoot is because that's what pro wrestlers called real pro wrestling, or when you do a legitimate contest. So nowadays you hear people use the term catch wrestling a lot, which I actually have a problem with. Whether in Japan or with my previous instructor, somebody like Gene LaBelle, they never used the term catch wrestling. They always use the term shoot. And even pro wrestlers will use the term shoot. The marketing of catch wrestling is a newer phenomenon to be the counter to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's hegemony over grappling. So I get that. But why did somebody like Gene LaBelle or pro wrestlers in Japan use the term shoot instead? Why do people in Canada, why do pro wrestlers always use the term shoot if the origins of their style is from catch wrestling, if legitimate contests are catch wrestling? As racist as even some of them were, they gave props and understood that pro wrestling was international, that it belongs to the world. So that means that they understand the finishing holds that pro wrestling, the shoot style of pro wrestling, submission wrestling is all about, has been influenced by the world, where legitimate shooters from Japan, Europe, America, Mexico, China, Mongolia, Hawaii, indigenous pro wrestlers, they all brought something. So even the most racist pro wrestlers understood that international mixture was pro wrestling. From an anthropological martial arts historical perspective, wrestling existed in nearly every culture. Submission holds existed in nearly every culture. So to assume that all of that came from either white people from the US or white people from the UK, how white-centric, Eurocentric, US-centric is that? The same people who say the Gracies got their armbar from judo will also say if they see a Japanese wrestler do an armbar in pro wrestling or in MMA that they got it from catch wrestling. How white supremacist is that? You might as well say the origins of all submissions come from catch wrestling. That catch wrestling predates judo, jiu-jitsu, every other wrestling art. And through osmosis and telepathy, all the other submission arts learned everything from catch wrestling. It's actually the opposite ethos of pro wrestling, where pro wrestling says, we learned everything from the world. Catch wrestling says, the world learned everything from us. They especially love to do this with Japan. And it's like, you know, they already had pro wrestling there, right? So you know they already had shoots there, right? You already know that they had sambo there, right? And especially you know that they have judo there, right? And this was before Carl Gotch or Billy Robinson ever got there. And even from a European perspective, historians from HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts, have shown that a lot of these submission moves also existed outside of the UK hundreds of years prior. So I can see catch wrestling trying to rival Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu by playing into their same nationalistic, fascistic, mythical past narrative and trying to outdo them in their own game, which is why there are actually white nationalists in catch wrestling as well. And I also won't name names, but I know people who basically taught themselves submission wrestling all from books and just rolling, which you can get decent at. And because they didn't have a pedigree or a lineage, they just made up that they're a catch wrestler and now they teach certifications and instructionals in catch wrestling. So this want to move away from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to something better or more wholesome, it might be a lateral move to a different pissing contest, to a different form of toxic masculinity. To hear the full episode or to watch it as a video breakdown, subscribe at patreon.com/southpawpod.
On the night we kissed, and I can't remember what I ever did before.